think one of the things as we have sort of a little bit of a brief time, and some of the things I think everybody hit on in all their conversations, and it's probably something that a lot of folks in the room are wondering about. Can you talk a little bit about how all the initiatives that are going on within your tribes and communities got started, and maybe would be some of the advice and some of the lessons learned from beginning that to be able to, for other folks to be able to take and use? Maybe we just start with Lauren and work our way down.
Sure. So I mentioned in our presentation about where we derive our authority, and so, but that's just the framework. I think that the methodology is very, very important. So for us, everything that we do is community developed, community led. So we have all of our stakeholders at the table. That's medicinal plant gatherers, traditional food preparers, contemporary food growers, all of that. And so by having all of them at the table, it really isolates us from some of the political nuances that exist as we think about modern politics. And so, everything that we do has to be ingrained in community development, community supported efforts.
And I think, as I mentioned too, that the 4 tribes that I represent, it kind of starts with the tribes themselves, the tribal members. That could either be the fishers themselves, but actually the governance of those tribes. They've seen things like I mentioned about the unfairness of the price of the fish that we're catching, and it, so they develop policy to address that. And as far as the treaty rights of that is really, is really been important for us, because like I mentioned, we've had elders that have went to federal, prison and stuff to uphold our treaty rights, and that history is not that long ago. It's only in the last 25, 30 years that was still the case. So.
I think for us, the biggest start was really getting that community engagement that I think was so important. I think our community was kind of stagnant for some time. We weren't talking to each other. Community meetings were very, very limited and very small. And again, I think we were just kind of in our own little silos in our community. And once we started reaching out and forming that health committee, that's when true change really happened for us. And again, engaging our tribal leadership throughout the process.
With Menominee, just the prevalence of diabetes, the obesity, heart disease, and the wisdom from some of our agriculturalists who are still there. We're still saying the answer's right in front of you, and we were challenged. They said, we put you in here for a reason. You got to look after everybody, and your community is judged on how well you take care of your elders and your babies. Those disabled are those type. So we were lucky. We had individuals that are coaching us. I'm only here because I've had those coaches, and somebody had to take this position, but it's them. Our communities jump forward. We have a community wellness workshop where quarterly all of the departments of the tribe meet, and we start discussing those issues that are prevalent. So it has to be a systems type approach. So Menominee's well on their way in trying to reverse some of the historic trauma and other things that we've seen. So I'm hoping we can take that torch and keep going forward.
Yeah, so some of the things that, can you hear me? Some of the things that we've learned is that just as it takes a community to raise a child, it also takes a community to raise a community advocate. So as you're looking, to recruit, and Norma talked about this last evening, she talked about recruiting the young people to be trained and also to know about indigenous-led research when we're talking about data sovereignty, and also talking about choosing the rightful, the ancestral justice, and the ways that we should be acknowledging our health and also the outcomes and what success looks like. For us, there was no template. There was no framework, and so now as we look back, we want to focus on healing-centered frameworks and also for all of you to learn, from our lessons, because we did something that has never been done before. And so as we look forward, this is something that we always question is allyship and also being an accomplice, that health solidarity is not accidental, solidarity is intentional.
I can talk a little bit about how we developed our food code project as well, and sort of the groundwork that we did for that. So one of the most important things that I think that we did when we started the project was to go actually around all of Indian country and do regional roundtables and actually listen and get feedback from community members, from Native farmers and ranchers, from tribal leadership, talking about the ways that policy could be effective at the tribal level in terms of promoting food sovereignty and securing, again, those relationships to land and to foodways, so that work can be strengthened and go forward. So we did over 15. We were traveled for basically a year in the first part of the project, just going around and listening to people and ground truthing that work. Because what we didn't want to do when we developed the Model Food and Agriculture Code for tribes was just to hand something over that wasn't going to be of use. We wanted to get that feedback and have those conversations first so that we were starting off on the right foot.
How do you, I guess for open up the panel again, how would you open up all the different constituencies and that you're balancing with all of this and working with community members, with the tribal government, with allies, with folks in the federal government, with folks in the state government? How does that all kind of come together and how did that sort of work for some of these projects or maybe continuing to work? If we start with...
Jump in.
Yeah, so folks want to jump in for it.
So I know, I think one of the lessons that I learned a long time ago, earlier in my professional career while I was at the Smithsonian Institution, was that the real authority lies in Native communities. And if we don't recognize that authority and we don't claim that authority, then we're going to continue to try and fit into systems that aren't applicable to what we're doing on the ground in Indian country. And so I think that a key component, and there is a huge learning curve as we decolonize and we really look at an approach to everything that we do. It's a tough road to hoe. I think that as you think about systems planning, we're not just changing the functions within that system, we're changing the people that are associated with managing those functions, and that's a tough road to hoe. And so as we think about that, I think that it's very, very important baseline that we recognize that the real authority lies in Native communities.
And I kind of follow up on that too, that, our members have been fishing since time immemorial, so we've had a history of our fish and how to handle it the right way. But with the changing of some laws and stuff like that, so we had to kind of adapt or not let them infringe on our sovereignty. So it was a member of, as Lauren had mentioned, of the community, of the tribes, of the history, so that we're not getting that state coming in on us or the feds. So building these laws so that we have the these policies enacted.
I think. Okay, sorry. I think, for us, it was, again, we're a really small community, and none of us really had the type of experience that I feel like we thought we needed to move forward with something like this. And that's where I think partnerships and collaborations is really, really important. Again, working with, when you work with different funders, whether they're nonprofit, if they're Native, if they're federal government, there's different language with each of those, I think. So when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm writing my report for IHS, it's very, very different than when I'm writing a report for Notre Dame Foundation. So, and also opening those conversations too. We've had other funders that are maybe at the state level that we've had those conversations with them where they're trying to meet us where we're at as well. And having that conversation and being open with, with these outside funders that maybe aren't as familiar with Native communities, inviting them into our community and touring our community, getting to know us as people, and then, letting them know, like, this is what works for us. We're storytellers. Data. We understand we need to provide data, but at the same time, how we present that data is very different than what I think they're used to. So, just learning together through the process over the last few years has been, again, very community-led and involving our community and, and in growing that next generation. Like I mentioned with our youth ambassadors, they learned a lot about this process, and this is something that they can bring back to our community someday.
Yeah, the McDonald's, Hardee's culture just wasn't cutting it. We could see that with our health indicators. And rightfully so, the community stepped forward and said, do it, act on this, come on, But they also were acting themselves, and everybody likes a winner. So, of course, the politicians then join on and work with the grassroots that are already doing it, and that helps to leverage things. But like anything else, when we do anything, and I know this from working through legislature, just that political side of my life, the first thing you have to do is educate people. You have to tell your story. They don't know it. And even with USDA, you got to go forward and say, the people who are reviewing grants, for instance, they're not emphasizing the permaculture and the agroforestry that are important to us. These are guys that are looking at monoculture, and that's their expertise. So you have to educate people, and many times when you do, they get that other side and there's buy-in. So it starts with the community, though.
I think for us, talking about trust is a very critical part as we've been exploring evaluation and research about our work and learning about, what does success look like. We also have to be questioning that, data travels by the speed of trust. Where I come from, all these conversations is relational. Everything that we do is relational. Our clanship, our relatives, the way that we are with our plants and the corn, and with the animals, but the same way that we're handling these sister legislations that we've created, that everything is relational. So when we're looking at evaluation and research and implementation and enforcement and compliance, we're trying to make that relational. We're also trying to have those conversations with the tribal government about being involved in these processes, because it's a different process of how they're trying to handle things. And so as we're looking at this, the ethical shift that we should be making is to acknowledge community members, to really not invalidate what they're doing, but to uplift them and to empower them and to empower us, that we also are operating on the same level as many of you here, whether we have a degree or not. And so for us, making those changes and making those conversations happen, it is something that is a beautiful thing. And in our suffering, we do have those solutions that we're trying to explore.
And I guess everyone on the panel has talked about, I think, the role of the community, but also particularly some of the roles of youth and how youth played in youth engagement in here. I know Stacey, you hit on that in your conversation as well, too, and Denise as well. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the role of engaging youth in this and the part that they've played in developing these policies out, and also open it to the panel as well.
Yeah, I guess with us, it became, again, I think I learned that coming to one of these conferences where why aren't we talking to our youth? They have a lot to provide. They have a lot of knowledge that we weren't tapping into. We weren't talking to them. And so when we formed this committee, we didn't have youth on there. And it took us a couple months later, and because we started having all these conversations about not only just healthy foods, but we talked about traditional tobacco. We talked about something that we didn't even was brought to us was vaping. Like that was just about a conversation about a year and a half ago. Like we didn't know anything really. And here we are in public health, and we weren't really aware of what was going on. And so they're able to bring us, what's going on with them, And so that was just really, really important. So, when we started that process, we went into our Indian education department, and we talked with the youth, and we presented this idea of wanting their, asking for their voice. And And through that, some leaders emerged out of that. And so that is where that process really started. And it's grown since then. Our unity group in our community has grown quite a bit now. And, now the youth coming up have looked at our youth ambassadors and where they're at today. And, they have their dreams, they're being a little bit more uplifted, I would say, just because they've seen the success of, these two youth, and that their voices do need to be heard, and they are being heard. And they are making a big difference in our community.
Yeah, for us, we do a lot of emphasis on joy and gratitude and servant leadership, and really talking and helping our youth to understand how to serve one another. Because when you're suffering, it's hard to serve someone else. And in that growth, when we are suffering, when every Navajo family is affected from diabetes and food-related diseases, when you have to serve somebody and you're suffering, that's very, very hard. And so for us, teaching that servant leadership is very critical about how do we serve and why should we serve, and getting involved in tribal politics and being careful about that, and the way that we do things and being joyful about the work that we're doing is very important for us to understand, and making those ethical shifts, to acknowledge one another. That, like I said, it's not about having a safe space, it's about having a brave space. In a safe place, you speak, knowing that you have to be respectful of one another, but in a brave space, you're speaking, from truth with respect. And so as we're meeting, as we're organizing, someone said Indigenous people are always organizing underground. We're always organizing, we're always trying to find a way, we're always trying to overcome these challenges. But in all of that, it's the youth that are the ancestors already. We tell them that you're the leaders already. Before, we used to say that we're the descendants of our ancestors. Now we say that we're the ancestors of our descendants, because that gives them shared responsibility and also shared investment.
And I guess I can add, the president of our school board is here. One of the directors of our University of Wisconsin Extension, our tribal college actually has an office there on the reservation. And they run a 4-H besides, and they're not milking cows, that's not us. But the agroforestry piece, they are doing. And that's important. We understood that the same way it took several generations for us to fall away from true agriculturalists, all of a sudden to this McDonald's fast food society, it's going to take a while to go back. So we're doing those in our classes, and we're creating those dual credit courses where we can slowly work from the school systems into the college with the degrees. We're actually building a couple of sustainable degrees now within our college. So we're reversing that, and I thank the people here that are helping us, and they saw that.
One of the things that we do at the initiative to try to support that next generation in this policy work, Colby mentioned earlier, we have a summer summit for Native youth who come to the university for a week. And one of the things that they focus on is agricultural law and policy. So we had a small group of hopefully 8 future agricultural food law attorneys. Some of you are in the room, and I'm not going to call you out, but please go to law school. But we work with them and talk about these issues that are in the food code, and so many of the things that all of the panelists have been talking on and working on in their communities, so they have an opportunity to look at those challenges as young people, but also to see the solutions to those challenges and know that those solutions are there, and that they have the support network and can get the training that they need to go back to their communities and solve those problems.
And so at Blackfeet, a part of our triple bottom line is the investment in youth, right? And how we instill institutional knowledge into our younger people. So as we look at contemporary methodologies, traditional methodologies, it's very important that we're recognizing all of those methodologies. I think because, at the very end of the day, when you look at the challenges that we have in Indian communities, it's going to take all of us sitting at the table and all of us solution seekers, right, to really come up with effective ways that we can be more effective in our communities. So our youth is integral to that, and so at Blackfeet we invest in, current programs that were created through Extension, 4-H, FFA, those types of programs. But we're also looking at cultural reclamation and how we utilize cultural practice as a means of prevention. And so when we think about dressing a bison or E&E, dressing E&E, right, in the Blackfeet way, right, there's a role for everyone in that, and so, once our youth learn those roles in these traditional practices, right, it's then translational into the home, into the contemporary home. So as we think about responsibility, all of that, and how we utilize a lot of those traditional methodologies, pull them forward, it's not just the contemporary ones, but it's the traditional ones as well that really give us an arsenal, right, to pull from in terms of methodologies and strategies that we can incorporate that really empower our youth, instill that institutional knowledge, and allow them the platform to, not only peer-to-peer, but the platform to really be effective in their communities.
And I think for our fisheries or whatever, this is just an overall, in the fishing fleet, it's getting older. The fishing fleet's getting older, and I'm just saying in the general. But something that's good about tribes is that the elders will teach their young. They'll bring tribal youngsters, their family, to continue on the traditions. And something in the academic area, in the fisheries, we got a lot of people that are technicians and a lot of tribal members that are technicians on the ground, field work. But we also are trying to encourage to get more biologists, more people that are, into policy, lawyers and things like that. Granted, the field work and the technical work is important, but having the leadership roles be filled by tribal members.
Well, I get us with our time up, but I'd just like everyone to thank all of our panelists for sharing their stories and all the incredible work that's going on within their tribes and their community. I know we didn't get to all the questions that folks asked, but they will be here to be able to answer that. So to Aaron, Denisa, Gary, Stacy, Buck, and Lauren, thank you all so much for sharing and being up here with us today. We appreciate everything you're doing and all the inspiring work that's going on that you all are leading. So thank you so much.